Good morning, everyone. We are the reporter for today, Zipporah Albagyo and Hannah Grace Barcelona, and our topic is all about the accommodation in learning and their types. What is accommodation?
Accommodation is the support provided to students to help gain full access to class content and instruction with altering the curriculum standards and competencies expected to demonstrate accurately what they know. It is designed to reduce or eliminate barriers in the learning environment in order to ensure students with disabilities to have equal access and opportunity to learn and participate fully in all educational programs. The barriers are removed to better access education. As a result, children can work around the effect of their disabilities.
Welcome. This video will explain how accommodations support students with disabilities in their education. Academic accommodations help to remove barriers to learning that exist for students with disabilities. They ensure that all students have the same level of access to education. Sometimes people believe that using accommodations gives students an unfair advantage, or that having accommodations is a privilege, but it's not, it's a right. Having a disability means that a barrier exists, and proper accommodations remove that barrier. Nothing more and nothing less. Think of someone who wears eyeglasses. Does this person have any special advantage or power over the other students who aren't wearing glasses? No. But if they didn't wear glasses, they wouldn't be able to read the blackboard or the textbook or their exam. Having poor vision would act as a barrier in their learning and assessment, and it has nothing to do with intelligence. For students with a mobility impairment, accommodations would ensure that their classroom is physically accessible. For students with hearing impairments, accommodations could include a hearing aid or adaptive technology. For some disabilities and disorders, academic barriers are not as easy to see, but they still exist. For students with learning disorders, a slow reading speed may impact their learning, and an accommodation would be speech-to-text software that reads the words aloud or extra time to complete the full assignment or exam like other students. For students with an attention or anxiety disorder, distractions can pose a significant barrier to concentrating, and writing an exam in a quiet room can allow them to focus properly. Just like a student wearing glasses, even with accommodations, you still have to do the thinking yourself. If someone tells you it's not fair that you have an accommodation, remind yourself that accommodations simply remove barriers, whether other people can see them or not. Having to learn or be assessed while fighting with anxiety, a slow processing speed, or through poor vision or hearing means that you're not able to learn at your full potential. You owe it to yourself and your brain to be at your best, use your accommodations, and show off your hard work.
Students with disabilities and additional needs who are studying in an inclusive general education classroom may need accommodations in the form of instructional support and other supplementary services. Here are some video clips of further understanding about accommodations in inclusive learning.
Some individuals have difficulty concentrating, while others have difficulty with motor skills. There are many different types of learning disabilities, and as such, the term learning disability should be thought of as an umbrella term used to describe a student who doesn't learn in the mainstream way. Specifically, a learning disability is defined as an impairment that interferes with the student's academic performance. The key point here is that the disability is explicit towards a particular area of learning. For example, a student may be able to read but not be able to write. Students with special needs were not always allowed in the mainstream classroom. In fact, just a few decades ago, students with learning disabilities were routinely segregated away from their classmates. However, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act requires that all students with learning disabilities be taught in the least restrictive environment. The essence of this requirement is to ensure that students are not unnecessarily removed from the mainstream classroom or isolated away from their peers. If a student in your class has a learning disability, they may find it difficult to stay on task. There are two fundamental ways in which the classroom assignments can be focused to help students with special needs stay on task. The first way is through accommodations. Accommodations provide an alternate way of learning the curriculum. Accommodations do not change the curriculum, but make changes in how the information is presented. For example, a 5th grade student is learning about the rock cycle, and they are given a graphic organizer to help them visualize the information.
Types of accommodation.
Presentation accommodation. This is when children with disabilities may need specialized presentations formats, especially those with sensory impairments, so they can learn the same content alongside typically developing peers. Presentation accommodation changes the way the instruction, direction, and information are presented. These accommodations allows a student with disability to access information in ways other standard visual or auditory means such as reading or listening.
Presentation accommodation has three learning needs. Number 1, visual support. Number 2, auditory and comprehension support. And number 3, listening and focusing. Examples of accommodations in visual support is minimize visual distraction, visual cues like the use of color, coded text, and highlighting, use of larger printed materials like the font size and the illustrations, use of sign language, and videos with closed captioning. Examples of accommodations in auditory and comprehension support are read aloud by a peer, audiobooks, digital text that reads aloud or gives definition of words, text-to-speech software, advanced organizer or story guide, and highlighting or color coding. Examples of accommodation in listening and focusing are advanced organizer, explicit verbal or visual cues, physical prompts, repeat or clarify directions and important information, note-taking support, and copy of directions.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, sir. I am Hannah Grace Barcelona, and I am the next reporter. Response accommodations allow students with disabilities and additional needs a variety of ways to complete assignments, written tests, performance tasks, and other activities. Providing such instructional and assessment supports allow them to access the same learning experiences as other students in a general education classroom. Response accommodation allows students to perform activities, assignments, and assessments in a variety of methods as well as solve and organize problems utilizing an assistive device or organizer. Response accommodation can benefit students with physical, sensory, or learning disabilities, including difficulties with memory, sequencing, directionality, alignment, and organization. Learning needs writing difficulty, e.g. errors in spacing visual, perceptual or spatial orientation, legible and handwriting. Examples of accommodations: different size diameter of pencil, marker or crayon, pencil or pen grip, triangular pear-shaped, scribe to record dictated responses, finger spacer, handwriting template, or guide on the student's desk, visual cues on paper, different types and sizes of paper. So there are good academic reasons for students to write extensively. Writing is a complex task that takes many years of practice to produce. Effective writing helps people to remember, organize, and process information. That's why we need accommodation to avoid complicated tasks like writing. Writing expression difficulty and example of accommodations: electronic dictionary with spell check, online dictionary, word processor with spelling and grammar check, writing keywords, list of sight words, writing templates, outlines, and graphic organizer. Therefore, there are any comprehensive commercially available teaching programs for writing difficulties. Like accommodations, there are strategies and techniques that can help students manage the challenges and improve their skills, like online dictionary and electronic dictionary with spell check to help the students with their problem and to help the student do his or her grammar correctly. Next, math difficulty. Example of accommodations: calculator, concrete models and manipulatives, visual representation, problem-solving guides, graphic organizer, special paper, or graphing paper for computation. We need accommodation to help students like provide charts of math facts or multiplication tables. Use visual aids or manipulatives when solving problems. Let the student use calculator when computation isn't what's being assessed. Give a rubric that describes the elements of an assignment. Use an extra piece of paper to cover up most of what's on math sheet or test. Make it easier to focus on one problem at a time. Setting accommodation. Changes in allocation or conditions of the educational setting or environment may be necessary for students who need supports in terms of behavior, attention, and organization of space and materials. Accommodation in a setting may allow a child who gets easily distracted to work in a quiet corner of the classroom in his own study carrel so that he will not be distracted by environmental stimuli, or a child who is still unable to read fluently may be allowed to take a silent reading comprehension test in other room with a supervising adult just so she could hear herself read aloud, which helps her better understand the story. Setting accommodation. Instructional or testing environments should be well lit with a pleasant temperature, adequate ventilation, and low noise or other distraction. Even under ideal circumstances, however, certain characteristics of the environment or setting may pose challenges for some students. Setting accommodations which allow for changes in the environment or in the way the environment is structured may be beneficial to those children. They provide assistance to those students with disabilities so that they can participate in the same educational opportunities as students without disabilities. Nevertheless, keep in mind that making accommodations. Scheduling accommodations, changing time allotment, schedule of tasks, and assessments, and management of time are some types of scheduling accommodations. Students with slower ability in processing information and directions well as with focusing issues may need these types of accommodation. Scheduling accommodation allow for changing to how time is organized. These changes can include giving a student more time to complete a test or assignment, breaking a long assignment into smaller pieces or chunks, and allowing students to receive instruction or take a test during a particular time of day. These adjustments often reduce students' frustration and fatigue, thereby allowing them the opportunity to access and demonstrate their learning. Timing and scheduling accommodations provide support that allows students with disabilities to access the same instructional opportunities as students without disabilities. As with other categories, keep in mind that timing and scheduling accommodations. Some examples of accommodation that can modify scheduling. Number 1, extending time for assignments and assessments. The purpose of reasonable accommodation is to ensure access, and this extends to providing flexibility within class policies to ensure students with disabilities are not disproportionately penalized for exacerbations in their condition, as they may be unpredictable and inevitable despite ongoing health and time management practices. Number 2, providing breaks in between tasks. The teacher designated adult should inform the student when it's time to a break. Supervision during break time is important to ensure that the student actually benefits from the break, as well as to guarantee that no inappropriate supports are available. Student uses a dictionary to define a word in the test. Number 3, providing a visual schedule or a checklist of individual responsibilities. Visual schedules reduce anxiety by providing consistency while also reducing resistance that comes with certain activities. Although most people associate visual schedules with pictures or photographs, events can be triggered through toys, objects, and even word phrases. The visual schedule itself it itself is a constant reminder to students where they should be, what they should be doing, and when she should start and finish. Number 4, providing predictable routines and procedures. Routines and procedures can help prevent discipline problems. Students know where they need to be and what is expected of them. This prevents a chaotic classroom where students are talking, getting out of their seats, or continually asking the teacher what they are supposed to be doing. By having routines and procedures in the classroom, students can expect a safe, organized environment to work in, and which help them succeed. Number 5, providing an electronic device with alarms and cues. Electronic devices should be used in school because they can be used in an emergency, increase students' organizations, and for educational purposes. To begin with, cell phones are needed in school because a student can have an emergency.